What up, climbing culture daily? This is Rhonda. And I really just wanted to pop on. There's been a lot of interesting conversations going on around anti intellectualism and really prompted by the Joe Budden podcast and the shenanigans that happen over there. Not just with Ish, and I think, I have my own things with him, but I think Flip also has some challenges when Mark speaks in a certain way about what he knows and offering his opinion. So it's a very interesting thing that is happening on that podcast. But I think we all know that is not just happening in that bubble on that particular podcast. So what we're seeing across the country, and it's really not new. I just remember, the Hotep dudes in the past, or I just remember even going to college and coming home, and my aunt, who was a part of the nation, but this not has anything to do with the nation itself, but was very challenged by me being a college girl, as she would say. And I went to a PWIs, which made it worse. And she would challenge me all the time about what I knew, what she thought I knew, and really did a lot of projecting. Like it was really interesting that things were inferred that I would never say. And I think that's what we just saw in this situation about flat earths and earthers and how to handle a conversation that you disagree with, right? Like information that you just disagree with. And so this situation, though, really is a quiet threat to the culture. I think for us as Black Americans, Black people, education and information is vital to our survival. Now, let me say this in that I was raised in a household that fostered education, but also fostered conspiracy. My dad and I still talk a good conspiracy here and there. But I think what I learned in that is balance, right? Like, and to question your government, question information, but you question it with information. You question it with research. You question it with facts. That's another thing that has been changed, is that there's no such thing as a fact anymore. Which is crazy. We're now into mocking leaders who, really challenge us to, think a little deeper, think about nuance. We're challenging those who read, who reflect, who believe in critical thought. We're now saying that's elitist. And we also know that intellect has nothing to do with formal education. So I'm not implying that you must go to an institution of higher learning to be an intellectual, right? That's not what I'm saying. But even those who, in our histories past, who we even deem as intellectuals who did not receive a formal education, read, studied, thought, balanced it out, and even admit when they were wrong. And so I think what we saw with Ish in particular is when information challenges your or triggers your insecurity, right? That has nothing to do about the conversation. That's really your own issues with where you feel like you are in your education. And we know in that situation, Ish projects himself or sees himself as somebody who's very pro black. But pro black isn't anti intellectualism. It's not. It goes into that being contrary, right? Like there's this thing about saying, red is purple right now. And we also see that with Kanye. Kanye can get on a platform and say Mars is going to explode tomorrow. And there will be people in the comments going, oh my God, he is so right. He is so deep. Now, mind you, he's just talking. And Kanye's been proven wrong more than he's been proven right. But like I said, I am, challenged by this situation where I understand, to really think through and have a cautious take on information that is coming from certain sources, because we know that it does cause us harm, and it has. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And as I said, raised in a household where we always talked about, different issues. I remember having a conversation with my father when I started doing HIV work in the mid 90s. And my father telling me, this is not new. This didn't come out when they said it. It came out in the late 60s. I have a tape of somebody talking about this issue. And I listened to the tape and I listened to him, and there you have it. I listened and moved on. So like I said, I will enter into that space and have that conversation, but I also will listen to those who have studied and who have devoted and committed their lives to understanding certain things that are happening in our communities. And I think both can be challenged and should be challenged all the time, but you cannot challenge information with an insult or telling someone they like to use big words. Whatever Ish was doing. Like I said, I'm challenged by that man in my own spirit. But, but here's the truth. Intellectualism isn't just ignorance, it's fear. I wrote some notes down, so if you see me reading. There's something about just accountability and feeling that because you may not have all the information, that it's challenging who you are, what you know, and all those kind of things. It is, we're in our right energy right now. I am right. And you stand on those wrong conversations and those wrong statements and that wrong information all the way through, instead of saying and conceding that I may be wrong. So, we put like this. We're in a time where everyone wants to go viral and wants to be loud, and we want to be Kanye. We want to be Kanye. We want to say the thing that, and we think, like I said, saying the thing that's contrary to what other people believe makes us deeper or something. But we can't, the culture can't grow if we don't, if we only value the loudest and we knowing that they're wrong. Now we're seeing that with MAGA. We're seeing that what's happening with our country, where we valued anti-intellectualism, well, they valued, to the point where we're in this situation now where information and facts and things that have been proven have been thrown out the door. We're about to go back to eugenics, and we're going to go back to pseudoscience, and we're going to go back to things that we have proven to be correct over the years and over time and over usage, right? vaccinations have worked. Just as one thing. That is still not to say that we're not supposed to still look into certain things. And that's what science is about. It's never just the end game. It's a continuation of study. And that's what a theory is. It's a theory. You keep trying to prove it or even disprove it. You know, I'm not going to go any further than that. This is just a little hot take. And, if we really are serious, and we have to get serious because it really is bad out here. It really is. I work in nonprofits, the nonprofit space, and I'll put it like this, pharmaceuticals are going up just as our food. We're going to see a lot of things happening in our communities. And so, if we're really serious about that kind of leadership, movement building, or even any level of growth of ourselves and who we are want to be, we have to be, stop being afraid of depth and nuance and being wrong. People are afraid to be wrong, and being wrong publicly is a hard thing. So we really need to start rethinking what intellectualism is, and understanding that it's not about the formal education. Like I said, there's a lot of idiots in college, but there is something about study, about due diligence, about critical thought, which we have really have lost, and just reading things that we even just like. It could be really something simple, but reading and then reflecting on what we've read, and that it's okay to be mistrusting of certain information, but then go further. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I'm sure Ish is going to say more insane things in the future. I'm sure he will. He's a Drake lover. You know me, I do not like Drake. Um, I don't know if there's any correlation to that intellectualism and loving Drake, but I'm gonna make it. So with that said, this is my little hot take. Comment below. Let me know what you think about this discourse and these conversations that are being had. Like, share, subscribe. I'm really excited. This channel's only been up for a couple of weeks or so, and we're already at about 80 subscribers. So I would love to see this hit, 100, 120 by the end of next week. So please share, and let's have some conversations about what's happening out here in this pop life, in the culture. So until the next time, this is Rhonda with Climate Culture Daily.